Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today, Edoardo Binda Zane of EVZ Coaching. Eduardo, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, man. I'm happy to be here.
No problem. Super excited to have you on as well. And before we jumped in, I want to read a little bit more about Eduardo so you can hear about all the awesome things that he's doing. And Eduardo is a leadership coach and a communication trainer. He provides leaders and teams with skills and tools to help them thrive in dynamic and changing markets and to increase their capability of generating value. Throughout his career, he has been working in and heading seven-figure projects, and he now combines that experience with other areas of work to develop skills in teams and individuals. Eduardo, are you ready to speak to the IMCL community?
I'm excited to speak to your community.
Awesome. Well, let's do it. So to kind of kick everything off, I wanted to hear a little bit more on how you got started. Could you take us through what I call your CEO story? We'll let you get started with all the awesome things you're working on.
Well, it starts in a very uninteresting way. As in, I've done the most classical 1-2 step, as in business school and becoming a consultant. And it's kind of interesting that 7 years in, I was actually a public consultant working on renewable energy policy. So take very complex projects, very big ones. We're talking millions. I was responsible for a bunch of people, 16 countries, all of that. And despite that is what I wanted to do, despite the fact that I had studied my whole life to get to that point, I hated it. I really deeply hated the routine of my job and not seeing an impact. And that's the thing that killed me was not seeing an impact and realizing that I was not me as a person anymore. I was speaking to a computer the whole time and I just couldn't do it. And then that's when things started to change, because literally out of the blue, I started going like, right, I need to do something else. I'm not happy with this. Let's just start a hobby. And that hobby was improv comedy, which is a lot bigger in the States than it is in Europe, even though Berlin has got quite an amazing community. I started to notice that all the training that I had just goofing around on stage, simplifying, of course, was helping me out a lot, making me better in a different way than other consultants that were working with me, like take negotiation, take riffing off something that someone else had said, take speaking in public, take understanding better what the other person had to say. And that was the kind of seed of whatever I did. After, I would say, a couple of years, 3 years, I decided to quit my job and starting what I do right now. It started off badly, as in I had all this kind of dream in my head in terms of, right, I'm going to now teach improv comedy to companies and they're going to pay money for it. And then, of course, you realize fairly fast that whatever little story you have in your head, if it's not coherent with who is in front of you, and improv in a company is really not a thing, there is no communication. So I failed pretty bad. And then what I started to do was still keeping a bit of that seed of improv, like in practice, but putting up a lot more knowledge, studying, working towards it. And now let's just say I'm working around 3 areas, which is my experience as a consultant and my studies. Improv is still a big part of it. And to that, I've added a huge amount of studies. I read academic papers like there's no tomorrow. I love communication, positive psychology. I love knowing what I can do to trigger something in a leader to make the person communicate better, help others grow, and so on. I hope I answered your question. I know I tend to spin out of topic when I go when I start talking about the story. I love it.
Nah, I absolutely love it too. You spun into, really phenomenal things. And it kind of, reminds me, I think I read something along the lines of like improv and how much is one of those, I don't know if you call it soft skills, so to speak, but it provides you that opportunity to really use things in so many different ways. And a lot of great things, sometimes it doesn't come from us having these grand ideas, but us pursuing certain interests, certain things that we think are fascinating, and then just kind of snowballing from there. And kind of sounds like you had that exact same experience.
Yeah, something like that. It starts with an idea, and then as long as you keep yourself loosely attached to that, but uh, don't be, as long as you're not dogmatic about it, that's what I'm trying to say. If you allow yourself to evolve, to go somewhere else, then of course the idea evolves, it changes into something else, and it can turn into something beautiful, or it can turn into nothing, but at least you know it's nothing fairly
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah, exactly. Or we hope so. So that helps out a ton. So I know you had started touching on a little bit on how you serve the clients that you work with. Could you go little bit more into that and how and what you do as a coach and a trainer to help serve your clients?
Well, pre-COVID or after COVID or
Let's do a
during
mix of
COVID?
both. I mean, yes.
It's got a bit of a mess. All right. Let's just say let's just start by looking at what my core is. I
Mhm.
think I truly deeply believe that the core of leading, of working together, of enabling better teamwork is being able to communicate. So that's where I hit on the most. If I want to sell it to a company, I put it as team building, as leadership coaching, as training the whole leadership team, you name it. But I hammer on communicating because you and I and everyone on earth, don't take it personally, we assume that we know how to communicate simply because we've been talking to each other our whole life. But once you start going deeper into it, once you start thinking about, okay, what does it mean to listen? How much energy do I need to put into this? What does the other person mean? How can I take the other person's perspective? It's a lot of work. So that's where I hit on the most. And in terms of what my training looks like, it's either me in a group and all sitting in a room together, or standing and doing exercises, and that did happen a lot before COVID. Now it's not really happening. Let's just put it this way. Um, Otherwise, I do a lot of one-to-one coaching. That, of course, takes different forms, a different structure. It's less practical. And the third way I like to work is via online courses. Or basically putting knowledge in a medium and selling that medium. So I've just written a book on emotional intelligence. I've just released a course on emotional intelligence for leaders. So that's also a way that is more accessible for people to get in touch with me. So it's these three. It's either one-to-one, virtual, or in person. Group workshops, they mainly work better when it's personal. Virtual, I still have some trouble with that. Or putting what I know in a medium that people can just get and see if they want to know more.
Nice. I absolutely appreciate that. And I love how you talked about the foundation of that communication piece. And I feel like you even, touched on something that I find that we sometimes don't understand, that communication is something that can be improved. It can be actually trained on. And I think so many times, as you said, we wake up every day and we have conversations, we listen to people talk, but we may not actually work on that skill. And I love how you have those different aspects related to that, because I think there's always a way to sharpen the saw, so to speak, even more and more. And I love how you have each of those, different ways by which people can get better at communication at the heart of it.
Can I give you an example that you might find
Yeah,
interesting?
please go for
Um,
it.
what's the most hated kind of meeting in any company? I think it's brainstorming.
Mm,
Everybody goes through a brainstorming session, and everyone, or 95% of people, come out of it hating it because they're like, we came up with nothing. We just shot all the same ideas, and it's stuff that we all know that it's BS, and we get nothing out of it. So why do we keep on doing it? The thing is that if you do your homework and look at the story behind it, and if you look at the research, there is this wonderful study that put together something like 3,000 people brainstorming in different groups, and they looked at all the factors. So why does it work? Where do you get the ideas? Is it the structure of brainstorming? Is it people contributing more or less? Is it the presence of the boss in the room? And what they found is that pretty much nothing had any sort of impact on how successful the session was, except one thing: whether people were feeling social pressures or not. So if you have social pressures in a room, you feel self-conscious about how you communicate, how direct you are, how open you are. And that specific factor messes up the whole thing. So that's also an example of why I think communication is such a core skill.
Yeah, and definitely, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like understanding or having that emotional intelligence, maybe even to understand that it allows you to create, I guess, environments where you can have better communication and, of course, get better ideas and brainstorming. But you sometimes have to be aware of those things to be able to create that environment so that you can have what you're hoping to have as a goal.
Definitely. I mean, it's one thing to have a problem, it's another thing to be aware of the problem. If you
Mhm.
have a problem and you have no clue about it, well, where do we start? So that's why um, when I still had the chance, I hope it's like vaccines and everything comes soon, but
Mhm.
of doing personal trainings. One of the things that I loved to do the most was get people to realize stuff like this directly in practice. Get people
Mhm.
to be like, oh, but I can communicate. I can say something that the other person understands, and we can communicate at a deeper level. That's what it means. So yeah, explaining it to people, it's extremely difficult, well, or easy, but it's difficult to have an effect. But if you manage to get people to, I don't know, put a light bulb on, uh, how do you say it in English, have a light bulb go off on top of their head, this
Yeah.
cartoonish kind of thing, Looney Tunes
Yes.
or the lot. And if you manage to get that in terms of communication, have people go, oh, okay, so that's what it means, then you've got someone. Then you've managed to make someone move. Otherwise, well, it's a lot of hammering.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I love, how you again have those different aspects for people to get better at it. Cause I think so many times we don't look at communication like a muscle, so to speak, or like going to the gym. But as you train on it, you learn of it, you kind of, take the courses and do all the things you have, you become more aware of it. It makes you hopefully a better communicator. So let me ask you this. Would you consider that to be like your secret sauce, is your ability to be able to really not just communicate with people, but train people to be able to see that? Do you feel like that's what sets you apart and makes you unique?
Yeah, possibly. It's usually I think about it, about my secret sauce is my combination of what I said before, my experience, my improv training, and my research. But now that you
Mhm.
say it, yeah, it does make a lot of sense, because one of the things that I noticed is whenever people step into a room with me, whenever I start talking, I maybe they consider me a bit clownish, this kind of hamster on cocaine going around the room and saying things. Well, and then it happened to me with I'm not gonna say the name of the company, but a big important company was training a lot of their leaders, and one of them, after the workshop was over, came over and said, I was extremely skeptic at the beginning, with this tone like full of gravitas, of almost menacing. But yeah, I noticed that when people step into a room with me and do one workshop, whether it's a free one or one that they've been invited to by a friend, you name it, they tend to understand more and want to know more about it. So yeah, I'll take that as my secret sauce.
Nice. Well, I absolutely love that. And I think so many times too that to me it's a sign of really becoming an expert at what it is that you do when you have that ability to not just know it to execute on yourselves, but you're able to teach so many people and you're able to at the heart have a conversation and just communicate, because I think so many times we forget about that aspect, that human piece, and really be able to make that connection. And
Mhm.
whether it be, like you said, telling jokes, do whatever you have to do to make sure that communication and the desired result happens. That's what needs to be done.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you touched upon one thing that I'm just going to touch lightly upon it, because otherwise I'm just going to take over the whole podcast and speak for a couple of hours. You said our ability of making jokes or joking with each other. And see, this might be an interesting reference for anyone listening. Go online and look up John Cleese's speech on creativity in management. It's a speech from the 70s, but it might as well been recorded 2 days ago, because it's still innovative. And one of the things that he points to is, why do we need to be formal? Why don't the best type of work that you get out of any team is if you have the confidence to be silly, to joke around, to cock about, like say it however you want. But if you have that type of confidence, well, then you have a lot more than professionalism. And if you don't and you prefer to have formality, well, what is that for? What does formality add? I'm not saying don't be serious, but humor can be extremely serious. Humor has a
Mhm.
point. Humor is creativity. It's got the same connections, same wires in our brain. Well, creativity and humor obey the same rules in our brain. But
Mhm.
yeah, I hope you got my point. That's let me leave
Yeah.
it at that. As I said, I'm kind of hijacking when I start going about this.
No, well, it's funny that you brought that up because I was actually going to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So it could be like an app, a book, or a habit that you have, but it's something that makes you more effective and efficient. But you mentioned that speech. Would you consider that to be the hack? Is to really understand that that speech and really be able to kind of execute on that? If you're kind of humanizing, I guess, the workplace to some degree, that's what it sounds like. Would you consider that to be a hack?
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, I wouldn't say that's a hack because it's not something that you can do quickly and directly. I'll give
Mhm.
you a hack later on. It's actually one of my favorite ones.
Okay.
But I do consider this to be, for me, foundational. I do believe that
Hmm.
that is something that everybody should see. It takes 40 minutes. I mean, you have 40 minutes to spare at some point throughout over the span of 3 days. Look up John Cleese's Creativity in Management and just enjoy it. Look at all the points that he can connect. I mean, he's one of my personal heroes, professionally and not. And but you asked me for a hack. So for me, a
Hmm.
hack is something extremely quick, applicable, and direct. And since I just went down the rabbit hole on emotional intelligence and leadership, I'm going to give you this one. Um, Most of us consider how happy we feel to be a result of, let's say, our conditions, or let's say genetics 50%, and whatever is happening around us for the other 50%. And that's a fair assessment, except that it's wrong. They've done tests about it, they put numbers on it. So how happy you and I feel right now depends 50% by your genetics, so you don't have any control on it. 10% is our context, but 40% is fully under your control. So you have direct control over 40% of your happiness. And the hack to boost that 40% when you're feeling down, when you're feeling deprived of energy, when you cannot focus because of a negative event that happened in your life, the wonderful hack is to take a piece of paper and a pen and write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things you are thankful for, as superficial and or as deep as you want, like from thank you mom for giving me an education to thank you sun for shining. Anything that you feel genuinely thankful for. You cannot just think it, you cannot just say it, you need to write it with pen and paper. That's important, otherwise it doesn't work. But only that act will boost that 40%. So if you're going through a rough patch and you need to boost your energy up, boost your happiness levels, boost your resilience, do it every morning for 5 days. I guarantee it will be night and day.
Nice. Yeah, I absolutely love, that hack because I think it speaks to us sometimes forgetting about all the great things that we have, the things that we have to be grateful for around us. And sometimes we can get so focused on driving towards the next goal or the next promotion or the next business, whatever it might be, that often we forget to look at the things that we've accomplished, the things that we've done. So absolutely, love that hack. And I wanted to ask you now for what I call a CEO nugget. So this could be more of a word of wisdom or piece of advice. It might be something you would tell a client, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
Time machine. I'll take the time machine. As fan
Mhm.
of Doctor Who, also, like, I'll imagine I'm in the TARDIS. But I think the biggest lesson that I will give myself, literally slap myself across the face, is nobody cares about you. You, Edoardo, from 5 years ago, have your little story, all the stuff that you built in your head about improv and your story, what you've done, but nobody cares. Nobody wants to listen to that. They only want to listen to what you can do for them. And 5 years ago, me knew that, but didn't understand what it meant. which it's not about your interesting story about improv or anything else. It's about what can you do to the client? What can you do to the client, and how can you phrase it to the client in a way the client can understand? That's the only thing that matters. Everything else is your own personal vanity. So yeah, that will be me traveling back to this podcast right now from 5 years ago.
Nice. I appreciate that. It's so funny you said that because I usually do a gratitude journal at the end of the day. And that's my practice of writing down, the things that I'm thankful for. But one of the prompts, I want to say it was yesterday, was about how as we grow older and by the age usually of 60 or 70, we realize that nobody is really worried about you. Nobody really cares about you. But gradually it's said in, 30 years old, you don't really understand that. You're thinking everybody's worried about you. By the age of 40, you realize that nobody cares. And then gradually you go on and go on, further and further along. But I think going back to like what you said, it hits home because it's about like, what can you do for the people? What can you do to provide value in their lives, not based off of what you think? And I think once we understand that, it allows us to be ourselves, but also to really understand if we want to bring value, we need to look outside of ourselves into what that person is actually looking for.
Yeah, and you can apply this to leadership, to communication, or to anything. I mean, I heard someone say that human being is a duty. So how can you help others? How can you make other people do better? Can be something big, can be something small. But yeah, I'm with you 100% on that.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that. And so now I wanted to ask you my absolute favorite question, which is the
All right.
definition of what it means to be a CEO. And we're hoping to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So Eduardo, what does being a CEO mean to you?
For me, being a CEO means having the enjoyment and the impact of the full weight of being responsible for yourself. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you have a kid, in my case, also being having that added responsibility. It's something you that I love, but it's something that I also fear because it's a lot to take on. It's a lot to take on, and sometimes it hits in a bad way, sometimes it hits in a positive way. It's For me, it's all about that. It's about you being in control and acknowledging that you're in control for the good and for the bad.
Mm. That's extremely powerful because I think so many times we can get caught into, I guess, the blame game, so to speak, of blaming this person or that person. But as you said, the double-edged sort of you have the responsibility for your life, for your business, for what you're impacting. And if we have, family, we have, children as well, too. Obviously, we have that on top of everything else. But I think it really hits home because I think we start to understand, as you said with your nugget, that it really is based off of what we do and what we do to kind of impact the world that we have, not on outside influences that we can
Hmm.
sometimes blame and get caught up on.
Yeah, definitely. And you can take it and bring it back also for me to the world of work, this idea of impacting others. Um, I mean, one of the buzzwords I work a lot with is the future of work or new work. And I've been asking myself, also working with a friend about it, what that means for me. And for me, that means putting the person as the purpose of work, both in
Mm,
terms at the center, making the person the protagonist of the world of work, both in terms of people that do the job, like are in an organization, but also in terms of the outcome. What's the purpose of the organization? It must be the well-being of people in any way you want to phrase it, in terms of climate change, in terms of personal enjoyment, in terms of health, in terms of anything. But if we manage to start bringing the person back at the core, then we have some more hope of going of a better future. And I know I'm being utopic about this, but where do we start otherwise if not from a utopia?
yeah, absolutely. And why, forget about the most important aspect. I think of business, I often say, that human aspect is something we often skip over when it really is the foundation or thing we should be using as a driver, if not the North Star for that. So, Eduardo, truly appreciate that definition. And I appreciate your time even more. What I wanted to do was pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best they can get hold of you, find out about your course and all the awesome things that you're working on as well.
All right, thank you very much. Well, anything, I'm always open to get in touch with anybody who's got a question. Best way to contact me is via my website, ebz-coaching.com, or via LinkedIn. Pretty sure there is only one person in the world with my name. And You mentioned my course. Thank you very much. I just launched it. It's called Emotional Intelligence for Leaders. And I would actually like to extend a discount code for anyone who will be interested of your listeners to take the course. I'll pass it on to you. You can link it below the episode, I guess. And if that's something they're interested in, it's something that be happy to give. Or if they prefer to read, I also have a book, Emotional Intelligence for Leaders, with somehow the same content or along the same lines, but of course, it depends on what you want to take out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll definitely, as you said, Eduardo, we'll have the links and information in the show notes for the book, your website, and all, and the course as well too, along with that discount code. So I appreciate you for making that available, and thank you so much for giving us so much wisdom and information about how we can improve, and be better leaders and communicate a lot better, in so many different aspects in our life and our business. So appreciate you, my friend, and I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation, and it's been great talking to you.